The day everything collided. Some people say grief brings families closer. I say those people have never met mine. I'm Ava Monroe. I'm 33 years old, born and raised in the sleepy town of Fairhaven, Oregon. Professionally, I'm a grief counselor. Yes, the irony is not lost on me, and I've been working in the field for nearly a decade. I've seen the weight of loss crush people in ways words can barely describe. I've held strangers as they broke apart. I've helped teenagers process the deaths of parents and widows try to sleep again without reaching for an absent hand. But none of that prepared me for what happened last spring. That was the day I buried Noah, my partner of 6 years. He was everything gentle in my life. A former elementary school teacher who made grilled cheese like it was fine art and left sticky notes with dumb puns inside my laptop. You know, the kind of person who tells you they love you like it's breathing. Noah died in a car accident on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was sitting with a funeral director trying to figure out the cost of cremation and what kind of urn wouldn't look like it belonged in a medieval dungeon. My mind was a foggy ocean of logistics and shock, but I still remembered to send my family the detailed service at 11 a.m., Friday, June 2nd, Greenwood Chapel. Simple, respectful, exactly the way Noah would have wanted. They said they'd be there. My mom said, "Of course, honey." My sister Danielle texted back a sad emoji. I should have known something was off when no one followed up. No call. No, "How are you holding up?" Not even a poorly timed Bible verse in the group chat. Then came the morning of the funeral. It was gray and drizzling, like something out of a Nicholas Sparks movie. If Nicholas Sparks were a little more honest about how grief makes your throat feel like it's full of cement. I arrived early dressed in black with a scarf Noah had once teased me for never washing. I held the program in my shaking hands, checking my phone every 5 minutes. 10 minutes to 11. No missed calls. 5 minutes to nothing. I sat down on the front pew heart, pounding with a hope I didn't even realize I was still clinging to. Every time the door creaked, I looked up. But it was just strangers. Noah's co-workers, some friends from the dog park, a few clients from my counseling group who somehow heard, but not my family. The chapel filled with the scent of lilies and wet umbrellas. The service began. I stood to read the eulogy I'd rewritten 3 times and still hated. I kept glancing at the back just in case. Maybe they were late. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe Danielle had spilled something on her dress again. But no, I read that eulogy with a lump in my chest that had nothing to do with Noah and everything to do with a front row that should have had familiar faces. When it ended, I stood outside under a weeping sky, shaking hands and thanking people I barely knew. My heels sank into wet grass. My phone buzzed once. A text from my mom. "Hope the service was okay. We're at Danielle's birthday dinner. Love you." No punctuation, no apology. And attached a photo of them all smiling at a restaurant. Candles lit. A giant slice of chocolate cake in front of Danielle. Her hair perfectly curled, her face glowing like she just won a pageant. Even my dad was there wearing that terrible tie he only pulls out for special occasions. My little brother grinned, raising a glass. Not one of them was at Noah's funeral, not even for 5 minutes. I stared at that image for so long my thumb went numb. The screen dimmed on its own. It was Noah's birthday, too. That part still gets me. He and Danielle were born on the same day 3 years apart. We used to joke about it, even had joint dinners once. She always said he ruined her thunder. I never thought she'd actually make that real. I went home alone that night, sat on the couch with our dog Biscuit, and watched old home videos on mute. Noah doing bad cartwheels in the backyard. Noah teaching Biscuit to high five. Noah burning pancakes and laughing through it. And the whole time, one question throbbed in my head like a migraine I couldn't reach. How do you bury someone you love while your family is out celebrating cake and balloons? I didn't have an answer, but I knew something had changed. A lonely funeral, a deeper wound. That night after the funeral, I didn't sleep. I just sat there still in my black dress, barefoot, wrapped in the throw blanket Noah's mother had knitted for us 2 Christmases ago. Biscuit, ever intuitive, rested her chin on my knee like she could feel the fracture under my skin. I didn't cry. Not then. It's strange how grief works. Sometimes it floods you all at once. Sometimes it trickles in slowly like a leak you didn't notice until the floorboards buckle. I thought maybe someone would call. They didn't. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, this time a cheerful happy birthday again. Danny, you looked radiant last night, from my cousin Jenna in the family group chat, followed by hearts and balloons and a string of photos from the dinner. Danielle blowing out candles. Danielle hugging my parents. Danielle opening a silver necklace from Aunt Marcy. And in the middle of it all, smiling, laughing, glittering, was the hole where my family's empathy should have been. I left the group chat. No dramatic exit. Just a silent leave conversation and a long stare at the screen afterward, wondering when exactly I'd become disposable. Noah would have had something comforting to say. Something like, "They didn't show up, Ava, but you did. You showed up. You honored me." But Noah wasn't here to say it, and I was tired of having to comfort myself with imaginary pep talks from dead people. 2 days later, I called my mom, because I needed to hear her say something, anything. "Hi, sweetheart," she answered, voice chipper. "Is everything okay?" I could barely get the words out. "You didn't come, Mom." She was quiet for a second. I heard dishes clinking in the background, the hum of a television. "Well, honey, it was Danielle's birthday. We made reservations weeks ago, and I mean she only turns 30 once." There was this thick silence, the kind that fills your lungs and makes you want to scream and whisper at the same time. "He died, Mom," I said. "Noah died. The man I was going to marry. The man who helped me through grad school, who watched The Bachelor with you and actually cared who got the final rose. You couldn't miss one dinner. You didn't ask us not to go," she replied, and that was the moment something inside me iced over. "I didn't think I had to." "Well, don't be dramatic," she sighed. "You know how Danielle is. She takes things personally. We didn't want to upset her on her birthday." "I was burying someone I love," I whispered. There was another long pause. Then she said the thing I'll never forget. "You've always been the strong one, Ava. We knew you'd be okay." That's when I hung up. Not angrily, not with some mic drop line, just quietly, like I was done trying to explain that strength doesn't mean you don't need support. That being capable doesn't mean you want to carry it all alone. For the next week, I ghosted them, not out of vengeance. I simply had nothing left to say. My sister texted me once, "Hope you're doing okay. Heard the service was nice." I stared at it for 10 minutes. Didn't reply. Instead, I buried myself in work. Grief counseling is a strange job when you're grieving yourself. It's like trying to teach someone to swim while you're still underwater. But strangely, it helped. Watching others wrestle with pain gave mine somewhere to rest. A few of my clients noticed I seemed quieter. One brought me a lavender-scented candle. Another offered to walk Biscuit when I looked especially hollow. They showed up. Funny how the people paid to talk to me about death were more present than the people who share my blood. A few nights later, I opened a drawer in our bedroom, my bedroom now, and found Noah's old journal. He never really kept it daily, but he'd jot things down sometimes. Thoughts, ideas, quotes he liked. I flipped to a page dated 6 months before he died. His handwriting messy and fast like always. "Family is who shows up when it rains, not just when the sun's out." That made me cry. Finally. One deep, ugly cry, the kind that wrings you out like a sponge and leaves you gasping. It was a strange relief. I started journaling after that. Little notes to Noah, observations, petty grievances. Danielle still hasn't called. Biscuit stole my sock again. "I miss your bad coffee." And every time I wrote something in, me softened. But the wound stayed. Not raw exactly, more like a scar that still stings when it rains. Then, 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Portland area code. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was spam, but something told me to pick up. "Miss Monroe," an unfamiliar voice asked. "This is Edwin Langston. I'm the executor of James Weatherby's estate. You're listed as a primary beneficiary. We need you present for the reading of his will." I blinked. I'm sorry, James Weatherby. Yes, he passed away last week. I sat down. James Weatherby was my great uncle. I hadn't seen him in years. A gruff, old-school war vet who once told me my degree in counseling was too soft for a world this mean. He wasn't warm, but he was sharp, always watching, always calculating. I hadn't even known he was sick. Why would I be in his will, I asked. Mr. Langston hesitated. I think he said slowly, you better come find out. A birthday dinner instead of condolences. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at 3 p.m. in downtown Portland. I almost didn't go. I mean, what could James Weatherby have possibly left me? A dusty rifle? An old coin collection? Maybe a lecture from beyond the grave sealed in a letter. But curiosity is a funny thing. Even when grief numbs you, curiosity will nudge you forward, whispering, what if? So I drove up to Portland with Biscuit in the back seat, tail wagging like it was just another day. The city looked the same, but it felt different. Maybe because I wasn't the same. I parked in front of Langston and Reed Law and made my way inside past polished floors and air that smelled like cedar and stale money. When I entered the conference room, I froze. My entire family was there. Mom, Dad, Danielle in a sleek navy jumpsuit, Aunt Marcy cousins I hadn't seen in years. They were sipping bottled water, scrolling their phones, and looking mildly annoyed like this was just another chore on their to-do list. Danielle looked up surprised. Oh, you came. I blinked at her. You didn't think I would. She shrugged, tucking her phone into her purse. You've been kind of off the radar. That's when my mother stood up and did the most astonishing thing. She went in for a hug. Ava, sweetheart. It's so good to see you, she said, her voice syrupy sweet, like we hadn't just ghosted each other for nearly a month. I took a step back. Let's just get this over with, I said quietly. Mr. Langston entered, all silver hair and tailored suit, carrying a sleek leather folder. He nodded curtly and took a seat at the head of the long table. Thank you all for coming, he began. As you know, Mr. James Weatherby passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87. He left behind very specific instructions for how his estate is to be handled. Danielle leaned toward me, whispering, I bet he left everything to Biscuit. I didn't smile. Langston cleared his throat. To begin the property on Hawthorne Lane, his primary residence will be sold and proceeds split evenly between his two sons, Richard and Jonathan. My uncles exhaled in mild satisfaction. Next, he continued, the coin collection and antique weapons are to be donated to the Oregon Military History Museum. Danielle fake yawned, riveting. Langston glanced at her briefly, then continued. And now? The remainder of Mr. Weatherby's estate, including all liquid assets, stocks, and intellectual property, is to be transferred to— The room held its breath. Miss Ava Monroe. You could hear a pin drop, or in our case, the sound of Biscuit's tail thumping the carpet. Excuse me, my father said, leaning forward. Wait, what? Danielle gasped, her voice rising an octave. Mr. Langston adjusted his glasses. All remaining assets totaling approximately $2.4 million are to be placed in trust for Miss Monroe with full access granted immediately. There is also a personal letter addressed to her, which I will hand-deliver after this reading. Danielle practically stood up. That's insane. He barely knew her. Langston didn't flinch. His instructions were clear. In fact, he specified that the letter should not be read aloud, but that the recipient would understand why once she read it. I felt every pair of eyes in that room stab into me like needles, but I didn't flinch either, because I did understand why. James Weatherby was many things. Abrasive, cold, sharp-tongued, but he saw people. He paid attention. He wasn't warm, but he noticed who did what and when. And he'd apparently noticed that when I was burying someone I loved, the people who should have stood by me were too busy lighting birthday candles. I remembered how he used to come to Noah's piano recitals, even when no one else in the family did. How he once gave us a crock pot and said, for the days when cooking feels like climbing Everest. He wasn't present emotionally, but he was aware. He had a kind of gruff respect for people who carried burdens quietly. And maybe, just maybe, he saw that I had carried too many for too long. The reading wrapped up in a daze of paperwork and stunned silence. My parents were visibly shaken but trying not to show it. My dad's jaw was tight. My mom was already whispering to Aunt Marcy, no doubt trying to make sense of what had just happened. Danielle followed me out into the hallway. Okay, she snapped, heels clicking against the marble floor. What did you do? Seriously? Did you blackmail him or something? I turned slowly. I did nothing, I said. Maybe he just saw what you didn't. She scoffed. This isn't fair. No, I said calmly. What wasn't fair was me standing alone at Noah's funeral while you were popping champagne. She opened her mouth, then closed it. And for once, she didn't have anything to say. I left the building with the letter in my coat pocket and Biscuit trotting beside me. The air felt different, like someone had finally cracked a window in a stuffy room. I didn't know what I was going to do with the money. That would come later. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility. And now, they saw me. Grief turns to distance. I didn't open the letter right away. That night, after the will reading, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of red wine, Noah's favorite, which I never actually liked, but somehow still kept stocked, and stared at the sealed envelope like it might hiss if I touched it. Biscuit was curled up on the rug, snoring softly, as if she too had finally exhaled. Eventually I opened it. Ava, I don't believe in sentiment. You know that. But I do believe in fairness. I watched this family for decades. Watched them smile for cameras and walk past each other's pain like it was background noise. You didn't ask for anything. Not once. But you showed up for everyone else anyway. You were kind even when no one noticed, especially when no one noticed. Consider this my apology for all the times the people who should have seen you didn't. Spend it however you like. But if I know you, you'll find a way to make it count. James W. I didn't cry. Not this time. But I did sit there for a long while, letting the letter press something soft and deep into my chest. And then a strange clarity settled over me. I wasn't angry anymore. No. Anger had burned through me weeks ago and left behind something colder distance. The kind you don't shout about. The kind you carry with grace like an heirloom you never asked for. The calls from my family started the next day. Danielle first, of course. Can we talk? She said in a voicemail. This is all just confusing. And it's your birthday next month. Maybe we could get dinner. I didn't answer. Then came my mom trying to be chipper. Sweetie, you must be overwhelmed. Let us help you manage all this. I mean that kind of money. It's a lot to handle alone. That's the thing. They only come running when there's something to gain. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to the lake, the one Noah loved, about an hour outside Fairhaven. I packed a thermos, 2 cups, even though I only needed one, and Noah's old flannel, which still faintly smelled like cedar and dryer sheets. I sat on the dock with my legs dangling over the edge and thought about the version of myself I'd been a month ago. Grieving. Alone. Still holding out hope for something resembling family. And now I was free. Not because of the money, though. Let's not lie, 2.4 million will buy a lot of therapy and extra guac. But because I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to explain myself or beg for empathy like it was a limited resource. The realization was oddly quiet, not a thunderclap, more like a soft click, like the final puzzle piece sliding into place. In the weeks that followed, I made changes. First, I took a leave from work. Burnout was nipping at my heels, and I knew if I didn't pause, I'd lose whatever parts of myself were still intact. Second, I created a fund in Noah's name, the Monroe Hastings Memorial Fund for Grieving Teens. He always said teenagers get the short end of the empathy stick when it comes to death. I used the money to hire counselors, develop workshops, and provide scholarships for teens who'd lost a parent or sibling. It didn't bring him back, but it built something from the wreckage. My parents showed up at my door one Sunday afternoon. I didn't let them in. I spoke through the screen door, Biscuit by my side like a furry bouncer. We're just worried, my mom said, trying to peek inside. You haven't returned our calls. You're shutting us out. No, I replied, calm as glass. You shut me out. The day I needed you most. You made your choice. My dad frowned. It was one mistake, Ava. We've always loved you. Love without presence, I said softly, is just decoration. They stood there, shifting uncomfortably, waiting for the part where I'd open the door and let them back in. But I didn't. And I wouldn't. Not because I hated them. I didn't. But because I'd finally realized you don't keep setting yourself on fire to keep people warm who won't even notice the smoke. A week later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a birthday card with Danielle's handwriting. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know how much I hurt you. I guess I was too busy wanting to be seen to realize you weren't being seen at all. D. There was no check, no gift card, no manipulation, just an apology. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled, because sometimes the distance gives people the space they need to finally see the shape of their own shadows. A sudden death and a strange call. Life has a funny rhythm. Just when things begin to settle into place, just when your heartbeat stops sounding like an emergency broadcast, you get hit with something unexpected. It was mid-July. The air was warm, thick with the scent of cut grass and distant barbecues. Biscuit and I were spending lazy days at the lake cabin I'd rented far from the emotional clutter of Fairhaven. The mornings were filled with birdsong and blueberry pancakes, the nights with tea and silence. That's when I got the second strange call. I was sipping coffee on the porch when my phone buzzed an unknown number, same Portland area code as the law firm. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Same number. I answered with a cautious hello. Ava Monroe. The voice was female, sharp but professional. Yes, my name is Justine Klein. I'm calling from Bennett and Stone. I represent the estate of Carolyn Weatherby. That name hit like a pebble dropped in still water, small but echoing. Carolyn Weatherby, James's estranged daughter, the one no one really talked about. Rumor was she left Oregon 20 years ago after a falling out over politics or inheritance or something. You never got the same story twice. She passed away last week, the woman continued. I'm sorry to inform you that you've been named in her will. I blinked. I never even met her. I'm aware, Justine said, but she was aware of you. And just like that, the strange spiral began again. Within days, I found myself back in Portland, seated across from a new set of lawyers. The office was colder, the furniture more modern. A steel and glass kind of vibe. No one offered me water this time. She left me something I asked. Justine gave a tight nod. Yes. But before I disclose what that is, I need to be transparent. Carolyn's relationship with her father, James Weatherby, was complicated. However, she was made aware of his final bequest to you. I frowned. How? Let's just say, Justine replied, your family's reaction made the local rounds. Some people notice what others pretend not to. I folded my arms. So what did she leave me? Another letter. A warning from beyond. Justine slid a manila envelope across the desk. A deed. What? A property. An old summer retreat in a Mount Cedar. Her words were, quote, if that girl's brave enough to walk alone, let her have a place where the silence answers back. I was stunned into silence. Carolyn had left me a house. Not just any house, her retreat. A secluded rustic cabin tucked into a hillside near a creek, far enough from any town that you could scream into the trees and only the owls would judge you. I drove out there that weekend. Just me, Biscuit, and a trunk full of cleaning supplies. The cabin was quiet, blanketed in pine needles and birdsong. Weathered, but sturdy. A fireplace that begged for snow windows that opened wide to sunlight, and a porch swing that still creaked like it held memories. Inside there were books, stacks of them. Political biographies, local history, gardening guides. On a side table was a photo of a much younger Carolyn, grinning with a shovel in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. I sat on the couch and whispered to the air, why me? And I swear, the wind rustled through the trees like it was shrugging. Back in Fairhaven, news of Carolyn's gift made its rounds quietly, then not so quietly. Danielle texted again. Another inheritance. Are you okay? I didn't reply. Mom left a voicemail that started sweet and slowly twisted. We're just concerned. You're isolating. People talk. Maybe come over for dinner, Danielle's making pasta. Pasta. As if spaghetti could undo a funeral-shaped hole. But I didn't block them. I just let their voices pile up in my inbox like unopened mail. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done performing daughterhood for people who hadn't earned it. Instead, I spent my days cleaning up the cabin, fixing loose floorboards, scraping paint, planting lavender along the path. Every nail I hammered felt like a sentence I couldn't say out loud. I hung James's letter on the fridge with a magnet shaped like Oregon. Then one night as I sat on the porch, I realized something. All my life I'd wanted my family to show up. But what I really needed, what I was finally building, was something better. A life where I showed up for myself. And now with Carolyn's unexpected grace, I had a quiet place to do just that. The inheritance twist. By late August, the cabin had begun to feel like more than just a place, it was becoming a version of home. Not the kind with photo frames lining the mantel or generations of holiday traditions, but a quiet, intentional space. A home of my choosing. One where silence wasn't loneliness, it was peace. Then came the envelope. No return address, just my name written in elegant cursive. It was waiting in my mailbox back at the Fairhaven house, wedged between a grocery store flyer and a dentist appointment reminder I'd forgotten to cancel months ago. Inside the envelope, a single sheet of cream-colored paper and an old photograph. The letter was typed formal, almost clinical, but its message stopped my breath cold. Miss Monroe, I'm writing to inform you that you are the sole legal heir to a private collection of audio recordings and personal journals previously maintained by Carolyn Weatherby. These items were entrusted to a third-party archivist with the condition they only be transferred to you upon her death. You may retrieve them at your earliest convenience. J.K. Executor. The photograph. Carolyn and James, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. All three of them laughing. Genuine laughter, not the kind forced for holiday cards. But what caught me wasn't the people, it was the little girl in the background. Blurry mid-step, maybe 5 years old, holding a stuffed animal that looked achingly familiar. It looked like me. I flipped the photo over, written in neat black ink, Mount Cedar, 1996. But that didn't make sense. I'd never been to Mount Cedar as a child, at least not that I remembered. The following day, I drove to the address listed on the letter, a storage facility tucked behind an old print shop just outside Portland. I was met by an archivist named Derek, who wore gloves even to handle the door keys. This is the full collection, he said, motioning to 4 large boxes. You'll want to listen to the tapes in order. The journals are dated too. She was meticulous. I brought them back to the cabin, cleared a space on the living room floor, and began sorting. What I found changed everything. Carolyn's journals were less personal diary, more field notes, detailed, precise entries on people, conversations, and oddly family patterns. She had spent decades observing the Weatherby family from a distance after her estrangement. But she hadn't just written about James or her brothers, she'd written about me. Saw Ava again today, age 10. Left alone at the family reunion while others played cards. No one asked her how school was going. No one noticed she didn't eat. She's got that same ache I used to wear on my face, that look of being present but never quite in the room. James sees it. He won't say it, but he watches her. There were dozens of entries like that, spanning years. She'd been tracking me. Not in a creepy way, but like an anthropologist tracking a rare, nearly extinct bird. The one person in the family who never quite fit, never shouted loud enough, but somehow still mattered. And then the recordings. I dug out my old tape player from a college storage box. The first recording was dated just 3 weeks before her death. Ava Carolyn's voice crackled softly through the speaker. I know you're probably confused, but I saw you. I saw you when your own mother didn't, when your sister needed an audience, and you vanished into the background like wallpaper. You deserved more, not just money, context. The people in our family. We were raised to measure worth in performance. Who showed up polished. Who made the best toast. Who kept the secrets that made the rest of us comfortable. You didn't play the game. That's why they never gave you a seat at the table. but that's also why you're the only one I could trust. I sat there listening until the tape ended with a faint click. My hands shook, not out of fear, but out of a grief that had morphed into something I hadn't expected. Validation. I hadn't imagined the dismissal. I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't been too sensitive or dramatic or bitter. I'd just finally seen the truth, and someone else had too. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. I know that sounds silly, but it felt necessary. I wrote everything I'd been too scared to say. You are not invisible. You are not difficult. You are not selfish for wanting people to show up. You were just born into a family that celebrated fireworks and never learned to value candlelight. The next day, I drove back to Fairhaven, not to move back in, but to say goodbye. I stopped by the Monroe house, still neat as a pin, still filled with everything that made me feel like an extra in someone else's life. Danielle answered the door. You look different, she said slowly. I am, I replied. She didn't invite me in, and I didn't ask to be. Instead, I handed her a copy of the deed to the Mount Cedar cabin. You always wanted a place to escape to, I said. Now you can have one. I've already packed what matters. She stared at the paper. You're giving it to me. Think of it as closure. Truth was, I didn't need the cabin anymore. What I needed was a life where I wasn't constantly shrinking myself to be palatable. So I bought a small counseling practice in Astoria, a town with salt in its air and people who didn't know my family name. I opened an annex just for teens, called it the Weatherby Room. No plaque, no fanfare, just a space where people could say things out loud and not be punished for feeling too much. That was the inheritance, not the money, not the cabin, the story. And finally, it belonged to me. My quiet revenge begins. It's strange, isn't it? How the word revenge carries all this fire and brimstone when sometimes the most powerful revenge is nothing at all. No drama, no confrontation, just silence and success. I didn't shout at my family. I didn't slam doors or craft bitter goodbye speeches. Instead, I let the absence of my presence speak volumes. And the more I stepped back, the louder that absence became. I moved into a modest apartment above a bookstore in downtown Astoria. The floors creaked and the ceiling leaked during storms, but I could walk to the pier in 5 minutes and hear the gulls every morning. I liked the imperfection. After years of polishing myself into something acceptable, the messiness felt honest. The counseling practice grew faster than I expected. Word traveled in small towns. That new grief counselor, the one with the soft voice, and the therapy dog she listens, really listens, Biscuit, of course, became a local legend. Kids would stop by just to pet her between appointments. I started keeping biscuits for humans, too. Shortbread, mostly. Noah would have rolled his eyes and added sprinkles. I renamed the practice quietly, Monroe Plus Hastings Counseling. Just a little nod to the man who taught elementary school children how to tie their shoes and how to breathe through panic. At first, I thought I was building something for others, but slowly I realized I was rebuilding myself. Then, out of nowhere, an email popped into my inbox. It was from the Fairhaven Herald. Subject story request. Local counselor's unusual journey. I blinked at it for a long time. Apparently, word of my inheritance and the Weatherby legacy had filtered through the small-town grapevine. A reporter wanted to do a local feature on the woman who turned tragedy into something quietly beautiful. I almost said no. But then I remembered what James had written in his letter. Consider this my apology for all the times the people who should have seen you didn't. So I said yes. The piece was published 2 weeks later. Nothing salacious. Just a soft focus article with a photo of me and Biscuit outside the practice. The headline read, From Silence to Strength. How one woman rewrote her family's story. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree after that. Danielle called first. I didn't answer. Then a string of texts from Mom. The article was lovely. We didn't know you were doing all this. We're proud of you, sweetheart. Are you free this weekend for dinner? I stared at the screen. I wasn't angry, but I also wasn't interested, because pride that only shows up in public is just performance. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, Real handwritten, old school. It was from my dad. Ava, I don't know if you'll read this. I know I haven't earned the right to say much, but I want you to know, seeing what you've built, how you carried all this without help. It humbles me. I wish I'd been better. I wish I'd shown up. I'm sorry I didn't. That one I did respond to, not with a long message, just a postcard from Astoria with a picture of the sea. I'm doing okay now. Hope you are too. That was it. Revenge, it turns out, isn't about making others hurt. It's about stopping the hurt from defining you. It's about stepping out of their story and writing your own. And mine finally had a beginning that wasn't tethered to anyone else's approval. I hosted a small open house at the counseling center that fall. Local teens painted the windows with leaves and silly ghost faces for Halloween. One of them, a girl named Hallie, who reminded me a little too much of myself at 15, tugged my sleeve as we set up snacks. "You really built all this?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Yep," I said with a smile, piece by piece. She looked around at the calm lighting, the couches that didn't match the walls lined with books. "Feels safe." That's when I felt it. Not pride, not vindication. Just peace. My family could have their birthdays and dinners and matching sweaters. Let them gather around tables and laugh at jokes I was never invited to understand. I had this, a place that made people feel seen, and I didn't need anyone's permission to keep it. Peace, finally, and a message to you. I used to think closure came with a big moment, a dramatic confrontation, a grand apology. Maybe someone begging at your doorstep with roses and tears, realizing just how terribly they had failed you. But no, closure, I've learned, is far more subtle. It's a quiet evening in late November when you realize you haven't checked your family group chat in weeks and you don't feel guilty about it. It's making tea in your favorite chipped mug, lighting a candle and realizing no part of you misses pretending to be someone else for their comfort. It's peace, not loud, not showy, but honest. I still think about Noah, every day actually. He visits in the little moments. When Biscuit tilts her head a certain way. When I hear a bad pun in a movie and instinctively turn to roll my eyes at someone who's no longer there. When I burn the grilled cheese just a little and laugh about it anyway. I think he would have liked how things turned out. I think he would have said you always had this strength in you. You just needed the space to hear it. And James, and even Carolyn, they didn't give me a second chance at life. They simply handed me the truth, and that truth let me make a new one. Some people will say I was lucky, that I inherited money and property and opportunity. But here's what they don't see. The real inheritance was finally being seen. Now I spend my days helping others find their voice in the quiet. Teens who think no one listens. Widows who feel like shadows. Kids who flinch when asked how they're really doing. They sit across from me nervously picking at sleeves or shoelaces, and I tell them softly, you don't need to be louder. You just need someone who's listening. And maybe that's the revenge. Not the bitter, spiteful kind, but the kind where you grow into someone you would have needed when you were younger. The kind where you build something that can't be erased by birthday parties or family dinners you were never invited to. I don't need the Weatherby money to feel wealthy. Not anymore. I'm rich in clarity, in peace, in a dog who sleeps with his paw on my foot like a toddler claiming space, in clients who tell me things they've never said out loud before and leave just a little lighter. And if you're listening, maybe late at night, maybe curled up with your own thoughts and wondering if you're the only one who feels left out, invisible, forgotten, I want to tell you this. You are not too much. You are not too quiet. You are not too emotional or complicated or hard to love. You were just surrounded by people who didn't know how to see you. But there are people who will, who do. And one day, maybe you'll walk into your room, and realize you no longer need to shrink to fit inside it. That's your real inheritance. Take it, use it, and build something that feels like home. Even if it creaks a little, even if it's just you and a dog and a mug of tea, especially then,